Hello, Boulder Comedy Show friends and family. Welcome back to another episode of the Boulder Comedy Show podcast. We have a great guest for you today, but before we get to our interview, I just want to say a big thanks to our presenting sponsor today, Terrapin Care Station. Terrapin Care Station has some of the best weed at the best prices you will find, and they got plenty of locations. You can catch them in Aurora, in Boulder, in Denver, in Pennsylvania, and they are growing and growing. So check out terrapincarestation.com for more locations and support your local cannabis company, okay? They support us. We're a local show. We support them. They're local weed. It's symbiotic. We love each other, so love them with us. All right, that's it for announcements. Thanks for tuning in. Now, enjoy this episode with Jackie Kashian. Welcome, everybody, to the Boulder Comedy Show podcast. We have another great episode for you today, and I'm very happy to introduce the very funny Jackie Kashian. Jackie, welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to rename my Zoom so that people know what my whole name is. What the heck?
And how to spell it.
How to spell it and what the email address is. Why not? I'm not above it.
I wouldn't be, to be honest. How many different mispronunciations have you gotten? Not how many, but like what are the ones that you're like, oh, this one?
Well, Siri won't do it. Siri won't do Kashian, like vacation. They won't do it. It has to be Kashian. So I have to call Russ Kashian, my brother.
Yep.
Call
Stephen AJ, his last name is Agyei.
Yeah.
And Siri can't get that. So I'm like, call Stephen Agyei.
Yeah.
And they're like, and it calls him.
My friend Nicole, her name is spelled Nice-Ole. So I just yell, hey, call Nice-Ole. And then Siri gets that for some reason. I don't know why.
I actually just said it and my phone started calling him. So make sure your phone's not calling Russ. That might be, that'd be an issue.
Oh my God, that'd be hilarious.
Right? Because it was definitely calling Steve.
Awesome. Good. No, it is not.
Well, thank you for joining us today. I'm rather excited to talk to you because, I met you. I think I met you either at High Plains or at Comedy Works first, and then from there we've just slowly done shows and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it was High Plains because I did High Plains before I did Comedy Works. Okay. And we had met before I did Comedy Works. So
gotcha. Okay. Yeah, because I felt like we knew each other in the green room. So
right. Yeah.
And one thing I've always loved about you, you're, just to toot your horn a little bit, you're so damn funny.
Thank you very much.
You're so fun to watch. You're one of those comics that I wish I saw starting. You know what I mean? Like I wish when I was growing up at like a year in, 2 years in, you were one of those comics that I was seeing.
And weirdly enough, I was there. I was doing stand-up at that time, but you didn't get to see me.
Which is a bummer. Yeah. And one thing I've always respected about you is you do, it's almost, you still have that love for the game in you with it. No matter what the show is, if the show, I feel like I won't forget the Arroyo show that we kind of blew, and we didn't have a good audience in there, and you came in and did a freaking knockout set at full strength 100% because there are at least 10 people here, so that's
it's always funny to me because I don't know why some people do stand-up comedy. If they don't like it, seriously, fuck off. Just go do something else that you enjoy, right? If there's 6 people, like I've done like a pile of these Zoom shows, where you perform for people sitting in their room, their homes, and you can't touch them. You can't really. You can hear the laughter a little bit, and it's awesome, but it isn't ideal, obviously. It's not the way we were all raised to want to see it.
Right. But it's hard to just smash a room down when each person is in their own room.
Right. Is how you get it's hard to build that momentum.
You can't break the Zoom.
Right. And but I will say that I did, like early back in March, I did an open mic on Zoom. And there were 6 people in the room, and it was fine. It was, it was what it was, because to some extent I just have to try the jokes.
Right.
And I like Bamford does this thing where she does stand up one-on-one with people. And you're like, and you think about it, and you're like, well, that's insane. Why would you do such a thing? And now that we live in this sort of this era,
she's ahead of the curve.
Oh, and as per usual, ahead
Right?
of the game, right? And one-on-one, you get the real laughs, right? Like we're interested in. I'm interested in what you're saying. You're interested in what I'm saying. You're like, oh yeah, that's funny, and
Yeah,
that's killing one-on-one. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it's definitely a fascinating space to try and perform in, and I'm glad that some shows I like to include mine in that, at least over the past 8 weeks of kind of molding to the medium, right, and not just being like, all right, well, I'm going to force what we did there here, because that's just not. It's just not going to be. It's just not.
What do you
work.
think the differences are? What do you? How have you adapted with the Zoom shows?
So one thing. So the way that I kind of run mine is a little bit like a Tonight Show format, right? So I come up, I'll do a monologue type situation, and then I do a news story, like a weird news story.
Okay.
And all the comics that are on the show are panelists in this round table discussion
and they can
of the
riff
news
on
story.
It.
Right.
Okay.
So then it's 5 of us, 4 of us hanging out, riffing, which people love seeing that.
And that is one of the joys of hanging out with other comics is
right.
the riffing.
Right.
So,
and so
the
we
comics get that.
Right. Comics, and that almost spurs them. Right. Exactly. They get that, they get that injection. And then the audience is like, oh, this is a side I haven't really seen before. And then they do about 5 to 7 minutes of comedy, which is enough to try some new stuff, to, again, hear yourself say it out loud.
Right.
And then we have a 3-minute interview, 4-minute interview afterwards.
Okay.
Like, hey, you did great. Come over to the couch. Let's talk.
Yeah.
And then it's just a more personal way to have to because when all you're seeing is 2 people on the screen.
Yeah.
It seems like a more fun way to handle that. So, and I can say on my end, I've enjoyed it way more than how I started in quarantine trying to figure this out. So I'll be honest, I'm a little selfish in that I like this, so therefore.
Well, and the thing is if you do the thing you like, you're going to find people who also enjoy that.
Right.
So
that's exactly right.
And that's fine. It's like it's the definition of podcasting. Right? So
right. Doing what you like, someone's going to find that groove with you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's all you're looking for.
Now, I have to say, this must be quite a wild ride, because from where we're in comedy now compared to where you started, good Lord, I bet you never expected this would happen. So let's get to our $1 million question.
Okay.
When and how and where did you get started?
Okay, this is a tale as old as time, for it has been told so many times.
Okay.
1984, I go to college in Madison, Wisconsin. I am 19, so this is my second year of college.
Okay.
Out of 5, you guys. Yeah. And
5 kids.
No, 5 years.
Oh, 5 years. Oh, okay.
6 kids.
I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there was a comedy club owned by Sam Kinnison's brother, Bill Kinnison.
Okay.
And there was stand-up, and I had never seen stand-up. I had barely heard of stand-up. I come from a sales background, not a there wasn't a lot of. I loved comedy as a kid, but the only thing I saw as a kid were sitcoms, and so I remember.
Never watched any stand up like Bill Cosby or any of that stuff.
No, I remember hearing the Noah bit in my dad's car once, and going, "What the hell is this? This is hilarious." And I remember seeing Gallagher on Make Me Laugh in the late 70s.
Okay.
And then I thought it was, I didn't get the gig, right? So I thought that Make Me Laugh, I thought he was so good on Make Me Laugh when my parents told me he was on Johnny Carson Tonight Show, I stayed up and I watched him, and it was terrible. It was
Gallagher's show was terrible.
Well, the Gallagher on Carson, and I've seen him. He's not a bad writer. He's a good writer and stuff. But what I happened to see when I was 16 years old was him in front of a giant couch on the Johnny Carson Tonight Show and handing out money to the audience, and which is a precursor
to that.
Well, the precursor to, I think, so it was a rage bit that he wrote. It was some weird, and weirdly enough, when I saw him later, I was like, oh yeah, this guy has rage. Anyway, so but I remember when I saw the couch bit, I was like, well, that's not fair. Anybody in front of a giant couch is going to be funny. That's hilarious. A giant couch is wacky. And but then I went to college. There was a club. I went to the club. I got drunk. I heckled the comedian. The manager was like, you have to shut the fuck up. And he could not shut me up. So eventually he said, there is an open mic every Sunday. Every Sunday there's an open mic. Feel free to take advantage of it. And so 3 weeks later I went to open mic. And it was genuinely like heroin. I literally got a 1.8 that semester. I was up every single night. I fell in love. Yeah, it was ridiculous.
I can't believe that those stories are actually true. That type of story. You went to a club, you heckled, and it was basically the equivalent. Hey, you want to get up here and try it? And you fucking got up there and tried it. And that's wild. Really?
Yeah.
No shit. Mm-hmm. Okay. And this is in
84, 85?
Okay. God damn. That's unbelievable. So then from there, you started going to open mics. Did you start producing shows? Did you start into writing?
It was literally, okay, so the club was open for 8 months and then it tanked. And then I wanted to quit college and just do stand-up, and my sister talked me into staying in school.
That's what my parents did.
A new club came into Madison, Wisconsin, and it wasn't the club that's there now. It was a different club that was there for like 20 years. He didn't believe that I did stand-up because none of the other, like, there were 6 other people there were 7 of us that we did stand-up, and some of those guys started. I was the only woman, and some of those guys started putting up, four-walling different shows and stuff. And I would do some of that. I would do the open mics at the student union. I would drive to Milwaukee and sometimes do an open mic, but it was.
And these shows were all organized that you just found through the grapevine? Because there's no
internet. Just normal. Yeah, there's no internet. It's
how are you finding these? You're just going around and just happen to see a sign?
Oh, in the old-timey days. Yeah. That's why the hangout was so much more important. That's why I got a 1.8 that semester. That's why I got a drinking problem. Is because you end up literally spending 3 to 5 hours a night hanging out, hoping to be introduced, hoping to be noticed. Hey, wacky, but it at the table. Somebody give me a set. Somebody booked me at your weird Best Western, bar. An hour and a half. Yeah.
So were you doing so early on? So I've heard stories from comics that didn't know what comedy was, and their first 2 years of shows were doing 45, 60-minute shows of just like who fucking.
Oh no. I don't know if you know this about. There's a lot of people willing to explain to a young lady how it's done.
In the 80s? Are you really?
In the 1980s, there were some gentlemen who wanted to let me in on the fact that I didn't know what I was talking about, and there were certain rules, and I didn't. And you don't have 45. I got 45. I've been doing it approximately 9 months longer than you. Anyway, wow. But so I mean, literally, there was a lot of input from the fellas around me.
Yeah.
And I was the only woman for so long. There were 2 women who I met in those early years that did stand up. One woman, I can't remember her name. Do you know why? She wasn't very funny. It was a classic stand-up moment where I'm like, yeah, I don't remember them. I don't even remember any of their jokes. So if I don't remember your jokes, it means you just didn't do a good joke that night, or you aren't funny. One of those two things. We can be the nicer one of it. And the other thing is I have a hard time with names and faces. Like there was a guy that I worked with. I think, twice in 4 months. And the gig that I did, you were talking about being a good sport. The gig we did together was at a place called Joker's in downtown Indianapolis. It was open for maybe 1 year, and it was probably 5 or 6 years ago. And he was featuring. And the guy's a 6'4" lawyer, feature stand-up comic from Michigan. His name is Robert Jenkins.
Okay.
And he is a great comic. We worked at this Joker's. There were 4 to 8 people at every show.
Total.
For 5 shows. 4 people, 6 people, 4 people, 8 people, 4. Yeah, it was. And so we would show up every night. And by Saturday, the bartender was like, "You guys are the best sports." We've been putting this show up, and every week has been like this horrible. And I was like, "Well, does the check cash? I mean, I got to run these jokes. I don't know. I don't know where else to do that except for at a comedy club."
Right.
And well, so Robert Jenkins and I worked that weekend, and I ran into him 3 months later at a weird tiny festival that the Yoders were running in Toledo, Ohio.
That sounds very accurate.
And right,
That sounds very accurate.
We performed above where the Mud Hens play baseball.
Oh wow!
And it was adorable, and it was a really big crowd, and it was really nice. And there was Robert Jenkins, who I had just met 3 months earlier. We had spent a whole weekend together, and I was like, "Hi, I'm Jackie," and he was like, "What is happening?" and he explained. He was like, "We just worked together 3 months ago," and I said, "Wait, are you that guy who had that joke?" And I remembered his joke.
Oh,
and
there you go.
He had a really sort of, it was a nice twist on sort of the self scan out at the grocery store.
Okay.
A lot of people were covering it. He had a real nice twist on it. He
go.
also is like 6'4" black man with a concealed carry
And a lawyer.
permit and a lawyer.
That's a pretty sweet combination.
Right, and he was
like
because he knows one of
the
he just did the Dork Forest where he talked about gun safety.
Oh,
it was an
cool.
amazing Dork Forest. Anyway, but he was so funny because he's like, "So you forgot this. This is something you're not. You see a lot of this happen." I was like, "I do not. I am so sorry, but I do remember your joke."
And that's really all that matters, because
right, and that's what he said. He was like,
yeah.
"I appreciate it. All right, well, you like my stand-up."
At least he's a comic first, lawyer second, because he's like, that's all I really cared about is you like my joke. That's all
Right.
I give a shit about.
He is that guy is a diamond, man. He's got a lot of facets, and
Nice.
super smart, really funny. And anyway, but the 2 women that I met, it was Vanda Michalowski, who was going by the name Vanda Michaels at that point in 1984, who wrote me. It's not in here. Who wrote me sort of the advice of stand-up comedy. It's on my website, JackieKashian.com. Okay. On the lower right-hand side, you just click on that, and it says advice I've received. And it's advice that I've lived. I've lived that advice. It's amazing advice.
Wow. And who was? I'm not familiar with who she was. Who was she?
Well,
was she
the thing is,
person?
A New York comic, friend of Sam Kinnison's.
Okay.
And so she came, and she was 24. She was probably 2 or 3 years into doing stand-up, and she was the headliner for the week.
Yeah.
But we hung out, and we got to know each other, and it was pretty amazing. And she stopped doing stand-up comedy for a while, and ended up, I think, teaching yoga for the Dixie Chicks on their tour.
Whoa, what? No, didn't see that coming.
Yeah,
Okay.
did not see that coming. Let's see if I can. Vanda Michaels was her name, and it's at the time, like, she went with. She went to Michalowski back after when she came back and did stand up again, and I ran into her in L.A. and the next time I was like, "Hey, do you want to have lunch? I could show you this thing you wrote for me." She was like, "That is my handwriting. I do not remember ever writing this."
That's even cooler.
Yeah.
So she just kind of felt compelled to do. God, that's great. I love number 6. You know, I've been reminding myself of that for like at least the last 5 years.
Right. Right?
We are doing this for fun.
It's supposed to be fun. Yeah. That's the whole thing. So
that's awesome.
Anyway, so it's but it's fascinating because she was a great comic, and she had like this. I even remember one of her bits. You know, I mean, that's a sign for me of like, oh, it literally, if I can remember the bit, it makes me. It's a better touchstone because I have such a bad memory for names and faces.
Sure.
So,
I've definitely been in the back of a room in another state where like someone did Boulder or something like that, and I was busy doing something, running the show, and I'm in the back of some show in LA, and I'm like, I've heard this joke before, and I turn around like, oh, I know this person, I know this joke.
There's that
name. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Just kind of get back into it with that. It's it is interesting. And then in 1990, I moved to Minneapolis because all the guys I came up with all moved to Chicago, and I was like, I'm sick of you guys.
Sure.
If I never see any of you fucking assholes anymore. And two of them were actually quite nice.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was like, but you're going to Chicago. I'm going to go to Minneapolis.
Yeah.
And so I went to Minneapolis, lived there most of the 90s, and then moved to L.A.
And Acme was your home club there.
Well, there was something called the Comedy Gallery when I first moved there. They had 5 clubs run by a guy named Scott Hansen. And he had like an empire, and it was very, very obnoxious. And and then his empire fell. And Louis Lee opened up his own club in 92, 93. And we were all like, oh, this seems saner. At least it's just one club. Sure. And, you know, it's really, whatever club you start doing stand-up, it's hard to get in, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's 1,000 hours of frickin' hanging around. Yep. And people not thinking you're funny, not knowing you're funny. Right. But, I mean, the good thing about the hanging around is that's how you got gigs, right?
Right. Yep.
That's how I started working the road in the 80s, and that's how I kept working the road through the 90s. And the internet was invented, obviously. You know, in 1989, I had a Mac Classic, right?
Yeah.
So it was 2 megs of RAM, nice. and I had an AOL account, and it was, you know, I think that was, and my sister bought it in 89. She gave it to me, I think, in 97.
Yeah.
And so I moved to LA with it, and I was like, I have a computer, and you know, and so more stuff was being done with email. You know, you were booking more stuff with email. Yeah. There was an alt.net board where comics would just sort of bitch. Louis C.K. was on it.
It was pre-Facebook.
Pre-Facebook. It was just a row of, you know, it was 1,000.
We've been
chili
bitching
dog.
since bitching's been available to bitch.
Oh yeah. People scratching in the side of cave walls, I'm sure, going, that guy's not funny, and then somebody showing up. But yeah, so it was, you know, because in the 80s and the 90s, there was 1,000 phone calls, 1,000 being ignored phone calls. Yeah. And you'd have to send the VHS tape of your set, and then they would ignore it. And then
another VHS tape.
And you had to invest in frickin' VHS tapes. Wow. And every VHS tape cost like $3 to mail. And you had to figure out a way to, you know, tape to tape, and the quality kept getting grainier and grainier, and it was just, the whole thing was bananas. But, you know, by like 95 or 96, yeah, I was doing 35 weeks a year, wow, doing stand-up comedy, and that was super, I mean, it was super fun,
so about 12 years, it took you to get consistently full-fledged.
Right, and I kept my day job. I always had a day job that was super flexible and was like willing to let me go without pay. But they were like, job will be here, don't sweat it.
What was your job back then?
When I first moved to Minneapolis, I had the worst job I've ever had in my life, which was at Kinko's.
Oh, really?
And yes, it was the worst. Literally, I worked there for a year, and I think I got a 15-cent raise. I think I was making like $5.95 when or $6.15 or something like that. Eesh. When I eventually quit. But then I started working at this hippie skippy T-shirt poster catalog thing in Minneapolis called Northern Sun Merchandising, and I did fulfillment for a while, and then I just did customer service. And everybody was pretty much stoned most of the time, and it was in the catalog. It was like, remember who you're ordering from. It's going to be a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And I did customer service, and so I would be gone some weeks from like Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And so I would work, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 10, 11-hour days to make up for it and to make money.
Yeah.
And so...
Because you couldn't... There is no portable computer at that time. Like there's
No. You know what? I know a guy, Greg Fiddler. Yeah. So Fiddler, he had this amazing gig, and he used his laptop. He had a laptop. It had to weigh 20 pounds. It had to be like the heaviest freaking laptop in 1997 ever.
Screen is this big on a computer this wide,
Right.
basically.
Entirely. And so they used to do this thing in the 90s with Leno had the Tonight Show, and Letterman had the Letterman Show.
Right.
And they both had these weird things where you could fax. Remember faxing?
Yeah.
You could fax jokes, monologue jokes, every day. And so Fid had he had a job where he had to write 10 jokes, and the numbers are something like this. He had to write 10 topical jokes a day by 9 a.m., by noon East Coast time.
Okay.
10 topical jokes from the news. And he got a straight $500 a month.
That's pretty good for
$500 a week. Yeah.
A week is pretty good in the 90s.
Except for the fact that,
Maybe
remember,
not,
he's writing 50 jokes a week for $500.
I guess that's true.
And
I guess that's true.
yeah, so he would and then he would end up writing a bunch of other jokes that didn't really fit into their parameters.
Okay.
And so it was okay at this time, or it was another gig, to submit unsolicited jokes like that, monologue jokes, to Leno.
Oh, cool.
And he didn't have a contract to do that. Leno paid per joke.
Oh, that's sweet.
Which then, he would make maybe, $800 a week
On
the joke writing, and then he would also do the road. So that was Fid's gig. But get this. So the Minneapolis Star-Tribune interviews Greg Fiddler once, and they're like, hey, you're on the road. It was just a puff piece, right? You're on the road and you write for Letterman. He mentions this other thing he does for Leno.
Uh-oh.
And they print it. Because he doesn't say, oh, by the way, they hate each other. They're all sad sack. And so it's in the paper. And of course, both Leno and Letterman have assistants who scan in the 90s or whatever. It sort of, you can put yourself on a Google alert now, but at the time they would scan all the papers.
Wow.
Looking for any references. And so he got fired from Letterman because of it. But get this. Here's the cool thing. Leno calls him on the phone. They don't know each other. But Leno calls him and says, hey, man, what the hell were you thinking? Did you get fired? And Fiddler's like, yeah, I got fired.
Yeah, real fast.
And Leno's like, what were you? I take it you weren't thinking. You didn't think that through, huh? Anyway, so he said, I'm doing a casino in northern Minnesota this weekend. Why don't you come to the show, meet me, maybe I can help you out. So Fiddler drives to this Indian casino. Leno does his set, right? And they talk and they meet. And Leno offers him a job. One of his writers on the Tonight Show. His wife has had a baby, so he's taking maternity leave. He's taking paternity leave.
Sure.
He said, what I can offer you, and Leno says this to Fid, he says, what I can offer you is 6 weeks of work. You get into the Writers Guild. You'll make the $2,500, $3,000 a week for working on the Tonight Show.
Wow.
But you can't have the job. That guy's coming back. It's like a 12-week gig. And Fiddler's like, yes. He said, so what you'll do is you'll end up getting a little stake to move to Los Angeles and get writing jobs. It'll get you in the door, right?
Yeah.
And so Leno really, really helped him out and did this incredibly nice thing. And so I remember it was after I was already, it must have been 99 or 2000, so Fiddler moves to Los Angeles. He has the gig, and it's coming on 12 weeks, and Greg's like, I think he's going to keep me on. Just because I'm doing really good. And the 12th week comes, and Leno's like, No, my guy's coming back. The guy's had the job for 12 years. He has a new kid. And Finn's like, oh, I should probably go find a job. And
God damn it. That sounds like a comic, too. That definitely sounds like a comic.
Exactly.
Business mind right there.
I'm killing it.
That is the most comedian thing ever. Just like, oh, shit, wait, what? Like, you meant that still?
Yeah. Oh,
okay, all right.
All right.
Upgraded his house, his car. He's like, no, I wasn't saving money. I thought I was just, I thought I was killing it so hard I'd be fine.
I thought this gravy river was just going to keep flowing by my gravy boat.
That's a great story. Wow. And so you had started with him in Minneapolis.
Right.
Okay, cool. And now you mentioned this, that it was all dudes and you met those two women like when you were starting. I'm curious, what was that like with just being the only female in comedy in the 80s? And did you even notice it? Like, did you even think twice about it?
I was not I've only recently realized that I was not encouraged to think about it. I was not encouraged to address it, for it to come up. Right. I mean, there was. I don't have a tinfoil hat factory for you, but there was definitely, and the conspiracy itself wasn't anything. I mean, there were bad guys, right? There were bad guys and gross and disgusting human beings. There were really good dudes that I'm still friends with. Yep. Greg Fiddler being one of them. And then there were guys who were just sort of complicit. And I've been complicit. Like, I've sat next to racists and people getting, beat up on it emotionally, and said and done nothing. So, I mean, I understand why complicity exists. Sure. It's hard to get in somebody's face and lose the whopping $200 a week you were going to make. Right. And but for the most part, there were no other women. They wouldn't put two women on a show because they said that the audience would not like it. Right? That they were going to...
The bookers and club owners.
Yeah, the bookers and club owners were like, audiences don't like it. There's things that audiences don't like from women and women comics, which is any sort of swearing. No swearing. They tighten up. You lose them. You don't want to do it. And then people would come through and you're like, she swears. And she's killing it. And then they don't want two women because they are going to talk about the same shit. And then you'd watch three dudes talking about their dick. Right. And sometimes there were unique dick jokes, and sometimes they were the same fucking dick jokes. And I
like the idea of a unique dick joke. I don't know why. That's funny to me.
You can use it as an album name.
Yeah.
And so
unique dick jokes.
And what they were really doing, quite honestly, is sort of culling us off from any sort of support, right?
Gotcha.
Like, I would be alone in a room with 3 to 5 dudes, and they would say things as if they were facts, and I didn't even have another woman to make eye contact with and go, well, that's bullshit.
These guys are idiots.
These guys are idiots. And occasionally there would be a dude, but most of the dudes would be like, the best you could hope for was they would not say anything. The same thing I was doing. Right. And if I tried to defend it, it would be like, bitches, man. You're taking it wrong. You don't understand what I'm trying to, Right. And you're like, it's one of the coolest things about there being more comics and comedy blowing up so hard in the 90s and with cable and all that stuff is that there are more women and there are more whatever tiny, non-straight white dudes. There's more of those people. So there's someone to make eye contact with and go, no, seriously. Right. Like I just did about a year ago, I did a tour. It was, I think a 3-week tour of Eastern Europe and Turkey for the troops. And it was with this comic who likes to book, it's 5 comics total. It's usually Sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 5. So this was 5. And there was one other woman with me, and I would have gone if I would have been the only woman, but it was just nice.
Yeah.
To have, just because whenever, and he's a good guy, this guy who books these things, but he's one of these, like, you know, you ever meet a guy who's kind of a piece of work until he has kids?
And then all of a sudden he gets
it levels him out.
Holiness. Yeah.
Yeah, it levels him out a little bit. The hero in 9/11, he's one of those guys, right?
Okay.
Ran Azizi.
Yeah.
He's a player. He's fuck this, fuck that. People are assholes. I'm gonna do whatever I want to do. And then they have kids, and they're like, oh shit, this tiny thing cares. I have to take care of this. And it's a creation of empathy.
Sure.
It's all that. Same thing happened with Kilmartin. Right. Anyway.
Okay.
So, but the thing, I mean, it can be. It's not just men. It's everybody, right?
Sure.
But there's this sort of dad. Like sometimes a good dude will be like a dad dude who will look at a woman and go, well, she is a lady and a queen, and you must treasure this and protect it and make. And you're like, or you could just not be gross, and we could just talk about what you're reading. Anything? We could just be people. How about that? And
I am another person. You know, that's true.
Just a stalk of meat that's in a different sausage casing, my friend. I'm also a stalk of meat with a brain on top, but I'm in a sausage casing with different orifices and different things. Yeah. It's hanging off of it.
Don't let that freak you out.
Don't let it freak you out, and don't let it lead you to cannibalism.
It's true. Yeah, it's
true. So
you thought because I've always said this when I've always assumed this, that it seems to me like, you know, the lifestyle that had to be around comedy in the 80s and early 90s, you know, being on the road, no phones, no stuff like that, it doesn't seem very appealing to a lot of people, I would think, you know what I mean? But it doesn't seem really appealing to women to go out and be alone in fucking bullshit Nebraska. And
it isn't appealing, but that's where the work was, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So do you think that how things have changed? You mentioned cable in the 90s is where the big boom came from, like to a lot more different types of people started doing comedy. Obviously, I wasn't aware of it then. And to me, it was the connectedness of everything, the being able to post the here I am, all this publicness is like, it does add some sort of like safety to it. Like, hey, I'm in this bullshit city in Iowa and I'm okay with it. Like I don't feel like.
Right. This is where you should look for my body.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do you think that is what kind of brought a lot more people into it? Or do you think it was seeing the Seinfelds and the Ray Romanos and the Cosbys of the 90s that really kind of, and then going into the Dane Cooks and the Carlos, the internet, the Bo Burnhams of the 2000s?
Well, I think, okay, so like MTV and VH1, there was like this weird comedy boom in the 80s where a lot more just stand-up shows were happening, right? Okay. On regular cable, mid-80s.
A&E had their whole thing. Yeah.
VH1, MTV, it blew up, and Friday Night Videos, all these things. And so there was this boom in the 80s that crashed, and then in the 90s, you know, and Comedy Central came along, and in the 90s, and sort of reinvented it. I mean, there was just there was this need with the invention of cable for something to fulfill 24 hours a day, right? Like if you look at 24-hour news, there was no 24-hour news.
Right.
That's why they have to repeat those stories every 47 minutes. Right. They're like, well, nothing happened. Let me tell you about this exciting thing that happened an hour and a half ago.
Right.
And so they just they rehash it. And so...
Breaking news.
Right. It's just fuck them. Anyway, so I can't do it. But the weird thing is that with stand-up, so there's always been women doing stand-up. There's always been black people and people of color and differently abled and all these things. There's always been someone who's been willing to risk it, right? And that's what it is. I mean, even if you're a straight white guy, risking it is risking it, right? And I remember in the 90s, meeting, black comics, and they're like, okay, you gotta stick with me in this town. I was featuring for a black comic. They're like, try not to leave me alone too much.
Interesting.
And I'll try not to leave you alone, and we'll walk each other to our cars. And then you'd hear, like there was a guy who was, I believe he is right now, the fire chief. He was a fireman, and he's the fire chief in Minneapolis. He was I'm spacing his name. Al Jackson, maybe? Yeah, I forget.
No,
it isn't Al Jackson. Al Jackson is a different guy.
Yeah.
But I think his name...
He was last week's episode, actually.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
It's a different Al Jackson then. Whatever. But and I'm spacing it, and I'm so sorry for not knowing anybody's fucking name. But the
but another jokes.
But he was telling me, he said, there's just towns in Iowa. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not going there alone. And quite honestly, having a white woman as your witness, as your wingman, as a black man, that's not super helpful. Like, that might actually create some tool bag going, what are you doing with a white woman?
Gotcha.
So there's help, and then I remember one time I accepted some gig about an hour 15 out of Minneapolis, and the guy that I was featuring for, I had never heard of him. He was just playing through, and he was like, hey, will you drive? And I'm like, my car's a piece of shit. You're the headliner. Do you have a nicer car? And he's like, sure. And he said, but I need you to drive. And so he shows up at my apartment, and I get in. The car's a bigger piece of shit than my piece of shit. And he's drunk, and that's why he can't drive.
Oh, wow.
And he's like, so I drive his car, and the whole time I'm batting his hands away from me. Like he's fucking crawling up my pants. Jesus. And I'm like, get off my shorts, you fucking piece of shit. And so I get to the gig. We land at the bar, it's just a bar, right?
Sure.
And so I walk in, and I call a friend of mine.
I didn't think this was a theater gig with how this story started.
Right. So we're in Minneapolis. We have to drive to like Eau Claire or something. So it's like an hour and a half away in Wisconsin. And so I call a buddy of mine who I just know him from open mic. We're just friends. And I'm like, and I can't get a hold of anybody. Like my brother lives in Minneapolis. Can't get a hold of him.
Yeah.
And so I called my buddy Larry, and I'm like, Larry, you got to do me a favor, man. You got to come and pick me up at this gig. I'm not getting back in the car with this piece of shit. Dude. And so Larry's like, where are you? And I'm like, I am sorry to tell you this. I am an hour and a half from you. And he goes, I'll be there. I'll be there in an hour and a half.
That's the best.
That's the best. So what you have is, Larry doesn't get a statue for this, but he gets my eternal gratitude. I have met plenty of decent straight white guys in my life, and who are willing to stand up, and in a bad situation and go, seriously, what are you fucking doing? You have to not rape that woman. And
how do we have to have this conversation? You can't do that, right?
Right. Just right. Yeah. I literally, when I just think about people not wearing masks, and people like all these sort of middle-aged white women that look like this confronting people of color out in the world going, you should go back to wherever you're from. And you're like, I live like 2 blocks from here, dummy. And I just wish, to be the third person, we all just have to go, what rock did you climb out from? Right. Be polite. Hide your racism. Hide your creepy fear. Hide your weird reactionary response that doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yeah.
There's no reason for me to be any more scared of a black adult man than a white adult man, right? In both cases, I'm like, well, it's very nice. It's nice to meet you. Are we good? We're good. Look at this.
We're good, right?
Yeah. You're stronger than me in both cases. Hopefully, you have no interest in punching me in the nose. So, and for 98% of my life, if not more, that has been the case.
Wow. So, I don't even want to, I feel like that other 2% is its own podcast.
It's its own podcast. Oh yeah, we've been talking like 45.
Yeah. It's funny to chat with someone who does podcasts because then it goes for quite some time. So real quick, so you went from Minnesota, or I'm sorry, Minneapolis, which is also in Minnesota, and then where did you move from there, and what took you there? Were you just ready to go, or did something take you out of your home?
I did like a big festival back when everyone didn't have a festival. There was a big festival.
Yeah.
It was in Aspen, Colorado.
Oh,
HBO ran it.
Yeah.
I didn't do very well, but I met several people who were like, if you move to Los Angeles, man, it's going to change your life. Well, of course. Yes, I'll be living somewhere else. Anyway, it'll be harder for me to do the road.
Right,
so,
yeah.
So I moved to LA. I had a friend. There's a certain point where you're like, you'd move to LA or New York. That was the thing in the 90s, right? And to some extent, it's still happening. Like, if you start doing stand-up comedy in a small town in northern Florida, you should probably move to New York. But there might be an interim. Maybe you move to Orlando or you move to Miami. Or Atlanta,
Which is a great scene.
Which is a great scene, yeah. Birmingham, Alabama, I think, is a really good scene, too. And there's a place in Tennessee, starts with a C. Cherokee, Chippewa.
Couldn't tell you that.
Really great with names, you guys. Something to Chattanooga? Sure.
Chattahoochee.
Sure. Chattahoochee? Sure. You're never alone. That's the good news.
Chattanooga.
Brent. I'm psyched. So anyway, but I moved to L.A., lived in a studio apartment with a friend of mine.
Yeah.
And we both did the road enough. She helped me
get what year is this?
That's 96 or 97. I think it was 96.
Okay.
A long time.
How did you get into the Aspen Festival from Acme? Did someone see you there, or?
Yeah. They were traveling around, and Acme put me up, and so I did well, and so Lisa Liongang, I think, head of comedy development at NBC right now.
Wow, cool.
And but she started out, I think, waiting tables at the San Francisco Punchline. Yeah,
that's how it always works.
Yeah, the thing really is she was. It literally, when you think about Karen Rontowski, was waiting tables in Vegas.
Love her. Oh, really?
Yeah, and started doing stand-up comedy.
I love her.
Yeah, she's a genius. I mean, there's
there's
such amazing writing going on right now, and it's cool.
Cool. And then from 96, you've been in LA this whole time. And still loving it out here?
Still loving it. I mean, the thing about Los Angeles is you really can't beat it. There's I remember it was a couple of years ago when I realized why people in California had never been to Wisconsin. And it's because they have a Wisconsin inside of California.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, yeah, but it's really nice. It's beautiful, and Wisconsin is beautiful. I love Wisconsin. I was like, the Lake Michigan. It's a large body of water you can't see to the other side of, and they're like, the ocean.
Maybe we got one of those.
And you're like, well, but it's freshwater. It's like we have thousands of freshwater lakes that are very beautiful and very big, and they're like, well, we have woods, and you're like,
We got those too. We have the biggest of woods.
Right, we got a lot of woods. We got canyons. We got deserts. We got mountains. We got. What you
want? We got it.
We got it, and you're like, okay, all right, I get it. Yeah. Anyway, because every time I bring my husband to Milwaukee, I'm hoping he will fall in love with it, and then we would
over 100.
yeah. So far, don't take him in the winter. Yeah. Don't have him visit where my dad lives in this old people apartment building that's actually in like a small industrial neighborhood.
Okay. Wow. So. Was it illegally converted from like a sweater factory into an old person
It's
home?
right next to a sweater factory. I would not be surprised. That's pretty great. Sweater factory. Well played.
Well, that's great. It's always interesting to see how people start because, like I said, I always know you from right when I met you, and then this is your comedy career as I know it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see how people's careers were shaped by their background, by their beginnings, and it's like, oh, this is why,
right?
Like, because it's just like, and it seems like you stayed in Minnesota for a solid 10 years, 8 years.
Yes, it was probably 7, but I mean, it feels like 10. It feels
Right?
like
You were a good comic when you left.
Yes, and that's what I mean. There's 2 ways to move to Los Angeles or New York. You either are young enough and good looking enough for someone to care,
right?
Or you're a good enough comic for someone to care.
Yeah. Yep.
So
that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was already, I think, in my 30s when in 90. Wait, I was born in 65, 75, 85, 95. Yeah, so I came when I was 32 years old. Yep. So it was already sort of, I had aged out of, and this has never been the ingenue anyway. You know, so
I feel like our careers kind of had this similar thing. I started when I was 19,
yeah,
and it was just immediately like fuck yes, and then I stayed in Denver till I was like 32. I had traveled. I was able to do it professionally for 2 or 3 years before I moved to LA.
Yeah,
and and here I am. And I really do have thought that too about California. It's like, I get it. I get why everyone fucking loves it here. After the rainy season, how green everything is. That's why everyone moved here.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. It's got everything you want.
It's gorgeous. The weather is delightful. You meet, there's plenty of people that are dumb because everybody moves here. Right. And so there's plenty of dumb people, but I have been all over the world. There's dumb people in every town. I don't hang out with any of them. That's one of my go-tos. I'm like, oh, I actually don't like you. Wait, and then I like to say this: I'll be right back, and then never return. I don't know if you've been to a party with me. I don't say I'll be right back and never return just if I don't like you, but if I don't have anything else to say, or I'm not good at parties. Sometimes I say I'll be right back, and then I literally leave the party.
Just Irish goodbye, everyone.
Yeah, because I can't face it.
I'll be right back in a couple weeks.
Right. Maybe I'll see you again. And sometimes I leave a party like this. I like to say, hey, I'm leaving. Tell everybody I was here till 4. Close the joint down. 4 a.m. And then I literally just fuck off. I can't.
Yeah. I mean, after a while, it's like I know where this is going.
Yeah. And I can't fix it.
Yeah.
I've done as much as I can. I do live in a helicopter training area.
I can hear that. Absolutely.
I don't know if you can hear the helicopters.
There's only so much we can do in post-production with a helicopter, but I think.
Well, I live in between a hospital. I live between 2 airports. 2 hospitals, and also Van Nuys, which loves a police helicopter for no reason.
They sure do.
So
yeah. I used to live in East Hollywood, or in Los Feliz by the Kaiser Hospital. Okay. So we would have helicopters come in over there,
Yeah, Kaiser is one of them right by us. Kaiser Permanente.
That's wild. So. Anyway, well, Jackie, that was fascinating. Thank you
so
much. I appreciate you coming on. And if people want to find more about you, they obviously got your website, JackieKashian.com.
Right there.
Right on the box.
Right there. Yeah, I'm doing Zoom shows most weeks. So cool. I'm working on the new album.
Are you still doing the Acme shows?
No. First 5 weeks that they turned themselves into like a studio.
Yeah.
Where they're doing live shows with like 20 people, and then they're pushing it to Zoom.
Cool.
So you could buy tickets remotely, or you can be the first 20 people that don't make each other sick. So, but I like, because he's got a 4-camera setup, Acme Comedy Company.
That's great.
You can watch it anywhere in the world, and he says his biggest problem is getting a comic to come to Minneapolis. So he's working through the local roster.
That's fair.
Which is fair enough, man.
That's fair. I mean, you got to start somewhere,
Yeah. You got to stay open. Are you kidding me?
Right.
Flappers was selling.
Closed for this damn long. Jeez.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well,
there will always be work if you keep.
Anything else that you want folks to know about? You got
if you like
podcasts.
Yep. If you like stand-up comedy, the Jackie and Laurie show is me and Laurie Kilmartin. Celebrating and bitching about stand-up comedy every Monday. And then the Dork Forest is where I interview people about what they love.
That's awesome.
And this week it's electronic dance music.
Oh, okay, cool. And so you had I'm sorry, who was the comic you had on for gun safety?
Robert Jenkins. That's a great episode, like 3 weeks ago.
Robert Jenkins. A big gun guy. So what was the idea of the podcast? Was it on gun safety? Was it on just guns? Was it on
essentially
guns?
He never really got into guns until he decided that he wanted to be a concealed carry guy. And he's a lawyer, so he knows the law of it, and
Yep.
he lives in the Detroit area, I believe. No, he's told me he lives in, I think, Lansing, whatever.
It's
But
in
he
the
works
podcast, but yeah.
right, and he works for the state of Michigan as a lawyer. And but the crazy thing is, it's a Zoom show, and he doesn't have one of those rings, so he's sitting in his dark basement with guns. And showing me like his different guns, his gun collection, because it's also a Zoom show.
Yeah.
But we talk a lot
Yikes.
of we talk a lot about safety, and we talk a lot about what you want out of a conceal and carry, and I explained to him. There's another great episode with Guy Branum. Have you ever had Guy on?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Not on this show. I've had him on Kibitz Room and Arroyo and stuff like that. Love him.
He's it's one of my favorite episodes of the last year. And Guy Branum talked about some weird aristocratic family who tortured their children. There were 6 of them in London. One of them grew up to be the Duchess of Devonshire. Whoa. Another one was Hitler's girlfriend for a second.
What?
And the third one, there were 6 kids, but the third one ended up being a law professor at Berkeley and taught Hillary Clinton.
Wow.
Law.
Whoa.
Yeah, so that's the Mitford sisters and Guy Branum. I would recommend starting the frickin' Dork Forest with that, and then just
exploding from
dorking
there.
out.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Emma Arnold did an amazing episode about bees a couple of years ago that was fascinating.
She's been a beekeeper for quite some time now.
Since tiny childhood.
Yeah.
Because she comes from bee people.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Her grandfather's a beekeeper. Her stepdad's a beekeeper. Sure.
Wow.
I know too much. Too much.
That's the greatest thing is when weird knowledge gets in your head, then you're like, what do I do with this? Like, I grew weed for about 6 years of my life, and I have so much information on how good weed is grown, and I'm like, I don't know what to do with any of this. I don't have space for a garden. I can't grow my own shit. So what am I doing right now?
I got a garden going on right here. We got tomatoes all week. It's pretty great.
Yeah?
We got tomatoes, cucumbers, zucchini, yellow squash, spaghetti squash, and potatoes, and Swiss chard. We're doing good.
That sounds pretty damn good. I'm coming over for dinner.
Please, if you are willing to drive to Van Nuys, I'll give you a couple of tomatoes if you want.
I live in Valley Village.
10 minutes from where I live,
Yeah,
max.
we're right there.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of the hill. I love it up here.
Right, me neither. It's normal.
I have an 1,100 square foot 1-bedroom apartment.
Yeah, with air conditioning.
It's the best.
Yeah, you want to live in the valley. That's what I would tell people.
Yeah.
Don't get your undies in a bundle. Just come to the valley. It'll be fine.
Right.
It'll be cheaper.
Man.
It'll be
Way
air
cheaper.
conditioned.
Yep.
And
Have
you don't
a
have to
pool,
get
probably.
Yeah, and you don't have to get dressed up to go to the grocery store because you live with a blue collar pile of humanity.
Yes, you do. Oh man, Jackie Kashian, again, thank you so much for
Thanks
coming
for having
on
me,
the
Brent.
podcast. Of course, it was always great to catch up as well, and I hope I get to see you live sometime soon.
Me too.
Well, hopefully. All right, we'll see you guys next time. Good night.